Don't you dare cry. That's what she said after she slapped me so hard I slammed into the edge of the sink. My vision swam. My ears rang like fire alarms. Blood trickled from my nose, warm and thick, pooling at my upper lip before dripping onto the white tile floor. I was crouched on my knees, trying to breathe through the metallic taste in my mouth. I hadn't even done anything. All I'd said, literally all I'd said, was that dinner would be ready in 5 minutes instead of 10. Apparently that made me lazy, mouthy, and ungrateful. Candace Moore, my stepmother since I was 10, stood over me in her floral apron and heels, arms folded like a teacher disappointed in her failing student. Not even a flicker of concern on her face. Just cold judgment. I said, "Don't cry. Stop trying to manipulate me." She turned and left the bathroom like she hadn't just knocked me into a porcelain sink hard enough to leave a bruise. My name is Delaney Moore. I'm 18 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. Not the trendy part with indie bookstores and overpriced coffee, but the foggy, damp suburbs where no one knows their neighbors and everyone keeps their windows shut tight. If you drove past our house on Northeast Fremont Street, you'd probably think we were just another boring middle-class family. Blue 2-story colonial with white shutters, one of those American flags that people put up just to blend in. Dad's old Dodge truck in the driveway. Porch swing. Clean lawn. Nothing to see. Inside that house, though, was rot. People who met Candace said she was a classic all-American woman. PDA president, hot cider at Halloween, charity bake sales, motivational Facebook posts about faith and hard work. You'd never guess that behind the front door, she was something else entirely. Behind that warm smile and her ever-present lipstick, there was something deeply cruel. Something small and mean and absolutely poisonous. She never raised her voice in public. That was her talent. Her abuse didn't come with screaming, it came with precision. She married my dad barely a year after my mom died of ovarian cancer. I was 10. I remember standing at the backyard wedding in a dress that itched and watching them say vows under a string of fairy lights, wondering if this woman was going to be my new mother. She was so beautiful, so calm. Everyone told me I was lucky. I was not lucky. First it was small. "Delaney, dear, why do you slouch so much? Or you're not going to wear that, are you?" Then came the helpful corrections. "Sit up straighter. Speak more politely. Chew quieter. Cross your legs. Don't breathe through your mouth. Don't question me." And then it got worse. By the time I was 13, the slaps had started. Only ever when we were alone. Only ever when my dad wasn't home from his graveyard shift at the airport. Started with one, then two. Then came the punishments. No dinner, locked outside in the rain, no hot water for a week. Always accompanied by the same phrases. "You're not grateful enough. You make everything harder. Why can't you just be normal?" She made me believe it was my fault. That I was broken. Difficult. Unlovable. And I believed her because I was a kid and no one told me otherwise. My dad? Ray Moore was the kind of man who survived by staying quiet. He didn't like confrontation. When I told him once when I was 14 that Candace had slapped me, really slapped me, he looked exhausted and said, "Lainey, come on. Candace is trying. Don't make this harder than it already is." That was the first time I realized he'd chosen peace over me. That I could be bleeding and bruised, and he'd still rather come home to a clean kitchen and no arguments. After that, I stopped asking for help. I stopped crying in front of them. I stopped fighting back. I became what she wanted me to be, quiet, obedient, invisible. But the truth is, no matter how small I made myself, she still hated me. If the laundry wasn't folded right, I got punished. If my homework wasn't done fast enough, I got punished. If I used too much shampoo, left dishes in the sink, took too long in the shower, wore my shoes in the house, punished. There was no way to win. Only ways to lose slower. Sometimes the punishments were subtle. No dinner, cold shoulder, silent treatment that lasted for days. Other times they were violent, a slap to the face, a tug of my hair so hard it pulled strands out, a push that made me stumble into a wall. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the gaslighting. I didn't hit you that hard. You're just being dramatic. God, you act like I'm a monster. Other girls would be grateful to live in this house. And the most devastating one, if your real mom were still alive, she'd be ashamed of how you turned out. She knew that was my wound. And she loved picking at it. I'd survived 8 years like this. 8 years of walking on eggshells. 8 years of hiding bruises. 8 years of pretending everything was fine whenever friends or teachers looked at me too closely. But that night in the bathroom, bleeding, humiliated, kneeling like a dog, something cracked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet. Cold. Precise. I remember looking down at the blood on the tile and thinking, this is never going to stop. Unless I stop it. No one was coming to save me. Not my dad. Not the school counselor who once said I was just going through a rough patch. Not the church ladies who always told Candace how strong and godly she was. It was going to be me. And her. I cleaned myself up in silence. Tissues stuffed in my nose, cold compress to my cheek. My head throbbed. But I felt calm. That night, when they were asleep, I went online and typed a question into a search bar with shaking fingers. How to prove domestic abuse when no one believes you? And that was the beginning. Of the plan. Of the evidence. Of the war. The morning after Candace broke my nose, she greeted me with a mug of peppermint tea and a sunny smile. "You're awfully quiet today," she said sweetly as she stirred honey into her cup. "You feeling okay, Lainey?" My face was swollen and tender. The right side of my nose had turned a strange purple-gray, and I could barely speak through the pain. But I knew better than to show weakness. "I'm fine," I said, barely audible. "Good," she chirped. "You have a tendency to overreact." I smiled back, or something like it, and sat at the table like the good little house pet she thought I was. Inside, I was planning her downfall. That same afternoon, while she was at her yoga class and Dad was sleeping off his shift, I went to Target with the $60 I'd been hiding in the back of an old calculus textbook. I bought a small nanny cam shaped like a charger block and a $20 burner flash drive. I told the cashier it was for a school project, and she didn't ask questions. Nobody ever does when you smile and say you're doing something for school. Back home, I tested it in my room, making sure the angle caught both the bed and the doorway. It had decent audio, too, enough to pick up whispered threats or slam doors. That night, I made my bed extra neatly. Wiped every surface. Said yes, ma'am, and thank you without a hint of sarcasm. Candace was suspicious, but not alarmed. She thought she'd finally broken me. Perfect. The next few weeks, I became an actress. Every insult, I smiled. Every backhanded comment, I thanked her. When she grabbed my wrist too hard, I winced quietly and excused myself. Then I wrote it down in a journal I kept hidden inside the liner of an old boot. Each entry was dated. Detailed. Emotionally detached, like a cop's report. I even recorded the time of day and what clothes she was wearing. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore, I was building a case. I researched state laws late into the night. Domestic violence, emotional abuse, assault of a minor, coercive control. Oregon had strong statutes, and I read them all, highlighting like my life depended on it. 'Cause it did. I learned that abuse wasn't just bruises. It was control, isolation, intimidation. And Candace was guilty of all of it. Camera caught the first real piece of footage 10 days later. We were in the kitchen. She asked why I hadn't cleaned the stove properly. A burner had a single speck of grease on it. Before I could answer, she shoved me backward with both hands. I fell against the fridge, nearly hit my head, but stayed upright. "You lazy, filthy little brat," she hissed. "You want to live here? Then act like a person, not a pig." I looked at her. right in the eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I said, "Yes, ma'am." And in that moment I saw it. A flicker of doubt. A fear. She didn't know it yet, but she was losing control. 2 days later, I went to urgent care. I told the nurse I'd fallen off my bike. She asked me twice if I felt safe at home. I hesitated for just long enough that she tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. But I stuck to the lie. I wasn't ready yet. Not without more footage. Till they documented the bruising on my back. Took photos. Filed a report, one that I later got a copy of through a records request I sent using the library printer. One document down. Many more to go. I started leaving my bedroom door open a crack, just enough to let sound travel to the camera. Candace liked to humiliate me when no one else was listening. So I let her. Stupid little orphan. Your mother would have given up on you too. Do you think your teachers would care if you disappeared? She had no idea I was building an audio library of her cruelty. Each new insult became a clip. Labeled. Archived. I didn't need her to hit me to prove what she was. I just needed her to be herself. I began rotating where I hid devices, an old phone behind the bookshelf, a second nanny cam and a fake alarm clock I found on eBay. I tested angles, sound levels, lighting. I became my own surveillance team. Meanwhile, I stayed perfect, polite, helpful, quiet. I folded towels with hospital corners, memorized her coffee order, wrote thank you notes to her friends after brunches I wasn't invited to. Candace bragged to her Instagram followers about how Delaney is finally maturing into a respectful young lady. Respectful? No. Calculating? Absolutely. The worst part was pretending with my dad. He'd sit at the kitchen table, drinking his reheated coffee, and ask how school was going. Fine, I'd say, even when I had a cracked rib or split lip under makeup. I hated him for being blind. But I needed him to stay blind. At least until I had enough. I knew what would happen if I went to him too soon. He'd tell Candace. He always did. And then I'd pay for it. This time, I wasn't going to miscalculate. I wasn't going to get caught. The second time I went to urgent care, I didn't go alone. I went with Candace. She had slammed my hand in the silverware drawer during an argument about why I forgot to defrost chicken. I didn't do it on purpose, she said to the nurse, fake tears in her voice. She's always so clumsy. I watched the nurse examine the bruising on my fingers. Watched her eyes narrow. She didn't believe Candace, I could tell. But Candace wrapped her arm around my shoulder and said, "We're doing the best we can, aren't we, sweetie?" I smiled for the nurse. And for the camera in my purse, which had recorded the whole car ride there, including Candace's whispered threat. "If you say one word, I'll throw you out. You'll be on the street by nightfall." Later that night, I backed up the footage to a cloud drive. Then I went to bed smiling. I wasn't collecting bruises anymore. I was collecting leverage. And eventually, Candace Moore would realize she had taught me too well. Because the quiet, obedient girl she raised? She was gone. What she had now was a mirror, one that was about to reflect every monstrous thing she'd ever done. It happened on a Sunday. Quiet. Overcast. Kind of Portland morning where the sky looks like wet paper and the whole world feels heavy and cold. I was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs and toast. Candace hated when I cooked anything that made the house smell greasy, but Dad had asked for eggs before heading out to work, and I figured I could make them, clean up, and be out before she came down. I miscalculated. She walked in just as I was flipping the toast. I felt the air shift before I even saw her, the way it always did when she entered a room. Like the temperature dropped. Like oxygen vanished. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned, spatula still in hand. "Just making breakfast for Dad." She stared at the frying pan like it personally offended her. Did you ask me before stinking up my house with that garbage? I stayed calm. My heart was racing, but my voice was level. I didn't think I needed permission to make breakfast. That was the trigger. She was on me in 2 steps. She yanked the pan off the stove and flung it into the sink so hard it clanged like a gunshot. Scrambled eggs splattered everywhere, counter, floor, cabinet doors. Then she turned on me. "You arrogant little bitch," she snarled. "You think you're grown? You think this house belongs to you? You don't get to make any decisions." Before I could respond, her hand shot out and struck me across the face. Knuckles first this time, not a slap, a punch. I fell backward, my hips slamming into the corner of the counter. Pain bloomed instantly, sharp, deep, like fire in my side. But I didn't scream. I didn't run. I looked up at her through tears and said, "You just made a huge mistake." She froze. For the first time in years, Candace actually looked scared. Because she knew. There was a camera, hidden behind the coffee maker. Perfect angle. Full audio. Wide view of the entire kitchen. Every word. Every insult. The punch. My fall. Her face. It was all recorded. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and plugged the camera into my laptop with shaking hands. The footage was perfect. No shadows. No blur. No deniability. I watched it once. Then twice. Then saved 3 copies, one to my laptop, one to a hidden USB, and one to an encrypted cloud drive I'd created under a fake email address. Then I backed it up again. Later that evening, when Candace called me down for dinner like nothing had happened, I went. I sat at the table with my cheeks still red and my ribs aching. She served roasted chicken like she was June Cleaver. Smiled at Dad. Asked about his day. Didn't even look at me. "Lainey was a little dramatic this morning," she said brightly. "But I think she's finally learning her place." Dad nodded, chewing. "Teenagers, huh?" And in that moment I realized just how deep his denial went. She could punch me in front of him and he'd probably find a way to call it discipline. I couldn't rely on him. I never could. But I didn't need him anymore. The next day I made a decision. I was going to show someone. Not just tell. Show. There was a woman at the high school named Ms. Blanchard, a social worker who everyone said was too intense, but who once told a student in front of the whole class that no one should ever suffer in silence. She was my best chance. So I waited until Tuesday when I knew Candace would be at her book club and Dad at work. I took the USB with me to school. My hands were sweating the whole ride there. I walked into the counselor's office during lunch without an appointment. Ms. Blanchard looked up from her computer with those sharp, serious eyes of hers. "Delaney? What's going on?" I sat down. "I need you to watch something." I expected skepticism. I expected her to say I was overreacting or that I'd need parental consent to file a report. But the second she pressed play, the second she saw Candace's fist hit my face, everything changed. She didn't say a word for the first 2 minutes of footage. At minute 3, she paused the video, turned slowly toward me, and said, "Delaney, how long has this been happening?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then said, "Since I was 13. And that was the first time I ever saw an adult angry for me. Not angry at me. For me. Ms. Blanchard stood up, closed her office door, and said, "You did the right thing coming here. I'm making a call." She called the school resource officer, a man named Sergeant Halford. Then the Department of Human Services. Then a domestic violence advocate named Mrs. Kinney, who arrived at the school within an hour. For the rest of the day, I was in meetings, questions, interviews, medical records, screenshots. Everything I'd been documenting I shared. They were stunned. Not just by the video, but by the sheer volume of evidence. The journal, the photos, the hospital visits, the audio files. You've built a better case than most adults ever manage, Mrs. Kinney said. This is serious. That evening, I didn't go home. They placed me in emergency foster care with a woman named Joan who smelled like lavender and made me macaroni and cheese without asking questions. Candace called me 11 times. I didn't answer once. Dad texted, "Where are you? You're scaring your stepmother." I didn't respond. Because for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't the one who should be scared. They were. I didn't sleep much that first night away from home. Joan's guest room was warm and smelled like chamomile and old books. Her cat, a fat, judgmental tabby named Milton, curled up near my feet. It was safe. Peaceful. But my body didn't know what to do with peace. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, adrenaline still pumping like I was waiting for a door to slam or a voice to yell my name from down the hall. 4 years, sleep meant danger. Silence was always a warning before the storm. Now silence just meant I was free. Almost. The next morning, Ms. Blanchard called to check on me. "They've launched a formal investigation," she said. "And they've seen the video. You'll be asked to give a full statement soon, but you won't have to go back." Not now. Not ever. I thought I'd cry when I heard that. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Okay," because I wasn't done yet. There was more. Much more. Even from outside the house, I had ways of watching. I'd installed a secondary cloud-based camera in the hallway before I left, hidden inside the vent cover across from the kitchen entrance. It was motion-activated and synced to my phone. A cheap model, but good enough. 2 days after I left, I got my first ping. The video opened on Candace storming through the hallway, phone in hand, face red. She's lying, Ray. Lying. She's manipulating everyone just to make me look bad. She's probably at some trashy friend's house laughing at us right now. Ray followed a few steps behind, eyes sunken, hair unbrushed. "You punched her, Candy," he muttered. "They've seen it. It's on video." She whirled around, the phone shaking in her hand. "It was an accident. She fell into my hand." Even he didn't believe that one. His silence said everything. I hit record. Later that week, I got a copy of the 911 call transcript. Ms. Kinney handed it to me gently, like it was a bomb. I unfolded the sheet and scanned the print. It wasn't Dad who called. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Roberta Linney, the 70-something widow who always pretended not to hear the yelling through the walls. But apparently she had heard something that Sunday. The thud. My fall. The screaming. "She's been hitting that girl for years," Roberta told Dispatch. "And the father just watches. Somebody needs to stop it." I added her statement to the growing file. Folder 3, Witnesses and Statements. I spent my afternoons helping DHS compile timelines. Photos. Notes. Medical records. I gave them everything. The burned hand. The bruised back. The wrist sprain Candace insisted was from cheerleading, even though I'd never joined a team in my life. They were stunned. "You documented all of this on your own?" the case manager asked one afternoon. I shrugged. No one else was going to. Meanwhile, back at the house, the walls were starting to close in. Candace texted me a full paragraph on day 5. "You're being ungrateful. You're destroying the only family you have. We opened our home to you after your mother died. Is this how you thank us?" I didn't reply. Then came the threats. "This will follow you forever. No one's going to believe you once the truth comes out. You'll regret this when you're older." I saved every word. Screenshotted. Archived. She wasn't just hurting me anymore. She was building the prosecution's case for me. But perhaps the most telling moment came on a Saturday morning, 8 days after I'd left. Camera caught her alone in the hallway, pacing like a caged animal. "I should have been more careful," she whispered. "I should have known she was recording. She's smart, that one. Too smart." She looked up directly into the camera, though she didn't know it was there, and said something that made my blood turn to ice. I should have gotten rid of her when I had the chance. No yelling. No drama. Just a calm, bone-chilling statement like she was talking about throwing out a broken chair. I downloaded the clip and filed it under intent. They didn't know it yet, but every step they took made my case stronger. They were unraveling. Paranoid. Desperate. And I was calm. Focused. Cold in the way they had taught me to be. At the next meeting with DHS, I brought a manila folder I labeled Psychological Pattern, Manipulation and Threats. Inside were transcribed audio clips, text messages, and screenshots of every instance Candace tried to rewrite history or threaten my future. "She's methodical," the investigator murmured as he skimmed the pages. "This isn't just abuse. This is sustained psychological warfare." He looked at me carefully. "Are you ready for what happens next?" I didn't blink. "She taught me how to play this game," I said. "She just didn't think I'd play it better." It happened exactly 2 weeks after I left the house. By then, I had built a near-bulletproof case, 15 pages of documentation, 3 hospital records, hours of hidden camera footage, screenshots, text logs, audio recordings. I had timelines, transcripts, and legal references. But what I didn't have yet was impact. Something so unmistakably brutal, so viscerally wrong, that no lawyer, no jury, no soul on this planet could look away and say, maybe she's exaggerating. I didn't have it yet. But I would. And when it came, it was uglier than I ever imagined. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting in Joan's living room, laptop open, editing audio clips for the DHS investigator. The air smelled like oatmeal cookies and hand lotion, and Milton the cat snored under the coffee table. Then I got a motion alert from the hallway camera. When I opened the feed, my stomach dropped. Marcus. My cousin Marcus wasn't supposed to be there. He was Candace's nephew, a hot-tempered 20-year-old with a record for minor assault and DUI. He'd spent a few months couch surfing with us the year prior until even Candace couldn't tolerate him anymore. And yet there he was in my house, shouting, pacing, fists clenched. "Where is she?" he growled. "I swear to God, Aunt Candy, if she drags you down, I'll handle it myself." Candace tried to shush him, pulling him into the kitchen, but the camera caught it all. Every word. "She's lying," she snapped. "She's just doing this for attention. But she's got people watching now, social workers, cops. You can't touch her." That was when he said it. "She's not here now. And if I do see her again, I'm not gonna slap her. I'm gonna shut her up for good." I paused the video. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just abuse anymore, it was a threat on my life. I hit save. Uploaded it to 3 locations. Sent a copy to Ms. Blanchard. But something told me it wasn't over. And I was right. The next night, Thursday, I got the final video. It wasn't Marcus. It was Ray. My father. The camera triggered at 9:42 p.m. In the footage, Ray was sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey, half empty. Candace was pacing again, muttering under her breath. "She made us look like monsters," she whispered. "She lied to everyone. My friends are asking questions. Church won't even return my emails. She's ruined everything." Ray didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "She didn't ruin it. We did." It was quiet, barely audible. But it was the first time I'd ever heard him admit anything. Candace froze. "What did you say?" "She wasn't lying," he mumbled. "She never was." Then he looked up, eyes bloodshot, and added, "I saw you hit her. I saw you push her. And I didn't do a damn thing." The silence that followed was suffocating. Candace's voice came out low and trembling. "Don't you dare turn on me now. Don't you dare." Ray slammed his fist onto the table. "She was a kid. Then, before I could even process what I was watching, Candace stepped forward and slapped him. Hard. Across the face. He stood. She pushed him. He shoved her back. She tripped over the rug and crashed into the wall, sending a framed picture flying. And the camera caught it all. It wasn't just the violence. It was the unraveling. Collapse. The illusion cracking open like glass. And then came the sentence that sealed it all. I should have let her go when her mom died, Candace sobbed. I never wanted her. She was never mine. Ray didn't respond. He sat back down, poured himself another glass of whiskey, and stared at nothing. I downloaded the clip. Labeled it, Confession and Collapse. That was the moment they stopped being untouchable. They stopped being family. They became exactly what they were. Criminals. The next morning, I walked into the Multnomah County District Attorney's office with Joan and my caseworker beside me. I didn't wear black. I wore red. Red blouse. Red lipstick. A reminder to them, to myself, that I wasn't hiding anymore. Inside the conference room, the prosecutor, Assistant DA Laura Zhang, reviewed everything I brought her. She was in her 30s, sharp-eyed, clinical. Not warm, not motherly, but fierce. She watched the kitchen footage in silence. She took notes while the audio played. She listened to Marcus' threat, Candace's breakdown, Ray's confession. By the end, she looked at me and said, "You've just handed us a textbook case of prolonged domestic abuse, obstruction, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The only reason we wouldn't prosecute this is if you asked us not to." I didn't blink. "Do it," I said. They came on a Tuesday morning. The sun was barely up. Portland was still wrapped in that damp, gray silence, the kind that makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. I was sitting in the corner of the waiting room at DHS, gripping a paper cup of bad coffee when my caseworker's phone buzzed. "They're in position," she said, lowering the phone. "It's happening." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I had already imagined this moment 100 different ways. I just closed my eyes and listened. 3 separate police vehicles pulled up to the house on Fremont Street at 6:17 a.m. 1 marked patrol cruiser. 2 unmarked. Candace was still in her bathrobe when they knocked. Ray was in the kitchen in boxers and a t-shirt, pouring himself coffee. According to the police report I'd later receive, Candace answered the door with her signature honeyed voice. "Good morning, officers. Is there a problem?" They didn't answer. They read her rights. Her smile cracked before the second sentence. Ray stepped into the hallway just in time to see her cuffed. His hands went up reflexively. He didn't fight. He didn't ask why. 'Cause he already knew. They both did. Marcus was arrested separately, picked up from a gas station on the edge of town where he'd apparently been crashing with a friend since the last blow-up. He resisted. But of course he did. He shoved the officer. Called them names. Bit at the cruiser window. But they got him in the back seat. No fanfare. No dramatic chase. Just a pathetic, violent man who thought the rules didn't apply to him, until they did. 10:42 a.m. I got the call. All 3 were in custody. Candace, charged with felony child abuse, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit assault. Ray, conspiracy, failure to protect a minor, obstruction, and accessory after the fact. Marcus, aggravated assault, felony threat, and prior probation violation. None of them had been granted bail. The prosecutor moved fast, citing risk to the primary witness. That witness was me. I saw them for the first time 2 days later, in court. The arraignment was brief, procedural. They stood together at the defense table, all in matching orange jumpsuits. Even Candace, who once screamed at me for wearing a hoodie to church, now stood there with greasy hair, no makeup, and a plastic ID bracelet around her wrist. When they brought me in through the side door, all 3 of them turned. Candace's eyes widened like she was seeing a ghost. Ray looked down. Marcus? He stared at me with pure venom. But there was something else under it. Fear. They were all afraid. 'Cause they knew exactly what I had. And what I was about to do. After the hearing, I met briefly with Assistant DA Zhang. They're lawyering up, she said. Candace hired a high-priced family attorney. Ray's using a public defender. Marcus has no money, he's stuck with the same. I figured, I said. But your case is solid, she continued. With the footage alone, we could get them to plead. If you want to avoid trial. I didn't even hesitate. No, I said. I want this public. I want people to know. She nodded slowly. Then we prepare for trial. In the weeks that followed, the story spread fast. News crews picked it up under headlines like Teen Survivor Brings Down Abusive Family and Portland Girl Exposes Years of Hidden Domestic Violence. The footage leaked, not by me but someone inside the court system. Suddenly, the whole internet was watching Candace slap me, watching Marcus threaten me, watching Ray do nothing. Some people left hate comments under the articles, called me a liar, an attention seeker, said I should have kept things in the family. But most people weren't like that. Most people said, we believe you. We're proud of you. You're not alone. Some even reached out directly, other girls, other boys, strangers who said, I thought I was the only one. I read every message. Every single one. Because I'd spent so long in silence, and now I was being heard. A week before the trial, I got a letter from Candace's attorney. It offered a deal. She'd plead guilty to disorderly conduct and emotional distress. No jail time. Probation. Counseling. I read it twice. Then laughed out loud. She thought this was still a negotiation. She thought I still wanted peace. I handed the letter back to the DA and said, we go to court. Courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just in temperature, though the air conditioning was brutal, but in atmosphere. Everything was sterile. Distant. Like justice was something that had to be performed, not just delivered. The judge sat high behind a dark wooden bench. No nonsense. No expression. On the left side of the room, the prosecution table where Assistant DA Laura Zhang sat, her files in order, her laptop glowing faintly. On the right, my family. Candace. Ray. Marcus. All in civilian clothes this time, but it didn't matter. They looked smaller. Thinner. Diminished. Like 3 actors forced to stay on stage long after the story had turned against them. I took the stand on the second day. Before I swore in, I glanced at them, my so-called parents, my so-called cousin, and saw 3 different versions of fear. Candace looked like a porcelain doll someone had dropped and glued back together wrong. Cracked smile, twitching fingers. Ray looked tired. Like he hadn't slept in months. Marcus? He tried to look bored. But his jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. They weren't in control anymore. I was. Please state your name for the record. Delaney Ray Moore. And your relationship to the defendants? My father. My stepmother. My cousin. Do you feel safe in their presence? No. Can you explain why? I nodded once, took a breath, and started speaking. I told them everything. How Candace began the emotional abuse right after my mother died. How the slaps turned into hits and how those turned into bruises. How Ray watched it all and chose silence over me. How Marcus threatened me the first time I was 12 and cornered in a hallway with no one around. I didn't cry. Not once. I spoke like someone giving a report. Precise. Steady. As cold as they had taught me to be. The jury hung on every word. And when I finished, when I said, That's why I started recording, because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. The silence in the room was loud. Then came the footage. They played it on the overhead screen, clip after clip. Candace striking me in the kitchen. Marcus twisting my wrist and pressing my hand to the stove while laughing. Ray watching. Saying nothing. Saying, she's always exaggerating. Then the hallway scene. Candace muttering, I should have gotten rid of her when I had the chance. And finally, the kitchen collapse. Ray's drunken confession, Candace's breakdown, the slap, the shove, the shattered photo frame, and her words. I never wanted her. She was never mine. People in the courtroom gasped. A woman on the jury covered her mouth with both hands. Even the judge's stony face cracked, just slightly. The defense tried. Candace's lawyer painted her as emotionally overwhelmed, a grieving woman who never fully adjusted to the role of step-parent. Ray's attorney called him passive, a victim of coercion. Marcus' lawyer? He didn't have much. He tried the boys will be boys defense, and it crumbled instantly when the footage of him threatening to shut me up for good played out on full volume. Zhang turned to the jury. This isn't a case about one bad day, she said. This is a case about years of systematic abuse, deception, and conspiracy to hide it. The victim didn't just survive it, she proved it. She brought the truth into the light. And now it's your turn to meet that truth with justice. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the room held its breath. Marcus, guilty on all counts, aggravated assault, felony threat, and prior probation violation. Candace, guilty, felony child abuse, obstruction, intimidation, conspiracy. Ray, guilty, conspiracy and failure to protect a minor. I didn't smile when the verdicts were read. I didn't cry either. I just breathed. Freely. For the first time in years. Sentencing, the judge spoke directly to them. To betray a child, to let her suffer in silence while presenting yourselves to the world as decent, is not just cowardice. It's cruelty. And this court will not treat it lightly. The Marcus got 8 years. Candace, 6.5. Ray, 3. Candace screamed. Literally screamed. Like someone had just torn the last mask off her face. Ray dropped his head and said nothing. Marcus? He looked at me, finally, with something new in his eyes. Not hate. Not even fear. Just defeat. And then, just like that, they were gone. Led away in handcuffs. Out of my life. Out of the house that had tried to swallow me whole. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Flashes. Questions. Cameras. But I didn't answer any of them. I turned to Ms. Zhang, shook her hand, and said, "Thank you." Then I walked off the steps, head high, red coat buttoned up tight, and disappeared into the street like I had somewhere better to be. 'Cause I did. People think that when the verdict comes down, when the abusers are led away in handcuffs and the courtroom empties out, that it's over. That healing starts right there on the courtroom steps like flipping a switch. It doesn't. Justice isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. The house on Fremont Street was sold at auction 6 weeks after the sentencing. All the furniture, the cherrywood dining table Candace obsessed over, the dusty upright piano no one ever played, the 4-poster bed I was never allowed to sit on, went into storage or the landfill. The neighbors didn't ask questions. They never do. Mrs. Roberta Linney, the woman who'd called 911 the day everything changed, sent me a handwritten card in blue ink. You were so much stronger than anyone gave you credit for. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I wrote her back. You did. And I heard you. Ray lost his job within a week of the trial. Gravora Group didn't want their name tied to a convicted felon with a record of child endangerment. His pension was frozen. His name was blacklisted. Candace, once the PDA's golden girl, became a cautionary tale in Portland's social circles. Did you hear what happened to Candace Moore? Whispered over brunches and bake sales. Her friends deleted her, her church revoked her committee status, and her candle business, Hope and Hearth, went bankrupt before the month was out. Marcus was sent to the state correctional facility in Madras. According to the domestic violence advocate I still kept in touch with, his cellmates didn't take kindly to men who beat women. And me? I left Portland. I transferred to Arizona State University on a full scholarship for survivors of domestic violence. Criminal justice major. Minor in forensic psychology. When people ask me what I want to be, I don't hesitate anymore. A prosecutor. But not just any prosecutor. I want to put people like them behind bars. The ones who hide behind doors and family photos. The ones who smile in public and destroy in private. They nod. They don't ask questions. And I don't volunteer more than I need to. My story's not for everyone. It's mine. But sometimes when I meet someone with that same haunted look in their eyes, the one I used to see in the mirror, I offer them a little piece of it. Not the whole thing. Just enough to let them know. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And you're not weak. Sometimes I still flinch at certain sounds. Raised voices in crowded halls. The clang of a pot on metal. The smell of peppermint tea. Healing isn't linear. It's not neat. And it sure as hell isn't quick. But it's happening. I sleep with the window open now. I leave the door unlocked. I walk through my apartment barefoot, music playing, no one watching. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. Steady. Real. Some people still ask if I feel revenge was worth it. They use words like vindictive or overblown. They wonder if I regret making it public. I always say the same thing. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. They tried to erase me. And I proved I was real. They tried to silence me. And I made the world listen. They tried to bury me. And I brought receipts to the funeral. If you're listening to this and you've been told your pain is imaginary or your bruises are your fault or that you're just being too sensitive, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not making it up. And you're not alone. You are never alone. The quiet girl they underestimated became their biggest threat. And that was just the beginning.